We are just a few short months away from the release of Marvel's Black Widow, and with it, the beginning of the Marvel Cinematic Universe's Phase 4. But this week, director Cate Shortland dropped a soundbite that got people thinking this movie might be a little bit less about Black Widow's past and a little bit more about her future. Today, we're going to break it all down and talk about what the impact could be on the MCU going forward. Let's do it. Hey guys, Cam here with Popcorn for Breakfast, and today we are talking about the Marvel Cinematic Universe and, more specifically, Marvel's upcoming film, Black Widow, which of course was supposed to come out all the way back on May 1st, but has now been pushed to November due to coronavirus concerns. Well, the interesting thing about this delay is that it's sort of locked the cast and crew of this movie in a never-ending press tour where people continue to ask them questions and they have to continue to promote this film. So they've been continuing to talk to the press. This week, Cate Shortland, the director of the film, was talking to Empire magazine, and she said something a little bit interesting. She was talking about the relationship between Florence Pugh, her new character's name is Yelena Belova, and Scarlett Johansson, who of course is Natasha Romanoff for Black Widow, and she was talking about the relationship between those two characters and those two people. And she said, and I quote, "Scarlett is so gracious, like, oh, I'm handing her the baton, so it's going to propel another female storyline," end quote. And this, of course, was grabbing headlines everywhere, was getting people very interested. Now you might think, that's sort of an insignificant statement. It could really mean anything. You're absolutely right. But what do we like to do here at Popcorn for Breakfast? We love to speculate wildly. This is our favorite thing. So let's take it at face value. First of all, what Cate is really saying here is that this movie is not an origin story, which I think we kind of knew. We know plenty about Black Widow. This movie takes place somewhere around the time of Captain America's Civil War. I believe it's technically after it, but somewhere in that region. So it's definitely not a true origin story for Black Widow, but more of just a side story that happened that didn't get caught up in the regular canon that we're now going back and sort of retouching on. So this movie may not be as much about Black Widow as we thought. It may be more about the dynamic of Black Widow and her family and this newcomer, Yelena Belova, which despite the fact that the trailers make it seem like they are actually sisters, if you've read the comics, you know that they have a sister-like relationship, sort of like this love-hate relationship in a way. And so that is why Black Widow refers to her as sis in the trailer, but they are not actually related. All of that said, you don't get Florence Pugh in your movie unless you think that you want her sticking around for a long period of time. I mean, let's just think about it. Florence Pugh is an up-and-coming actor, one that has a tremendous amount of promise, one who is already elite in Academy Award status in terms of her acting ability. And when you look at the MCU going forward, that's exactly the kind of talent they're trying to get. Also, we should consider why this movie is coming out now. So, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen Avengers Endgame, Black Widow dies in that movie. So why are we now going back to have a Black Widow story? Well, I think it's twofold. I think one reason is that Avengers Endgame, because of the way the story was structured, we really didn't get that sort of final story, last hurrah, last ride with Black Widow, because it sort of took us all by surprise. And so this is a chance for us to go back, have an epic Black Widow movie, one that's really all about her and her exploits and all the things that she can do, since we didn't get that in Avengers Endgame. So I think that's one thing. But on the other hand, they have to be kicking off something bigger here, right? I mean, why is this the first movie in Phase 4? And you have a huge Marvel villain in Taskmaster coming into this film. Could we see a scenario in which Taskmaster escapes the events of this film and goes on to be the next big bad? It's possible. He has that level of ability. He is that big of a name as a Marvel villain. And what does that mean for Yelena Belova? And I think this is the big question that everybody is trying to answer. What does this mean, handing her the baton? Will she be the future Black Widow? Well, in a lot of ways, it's a hard question to answer because Yelena Belova in the comic books has a really difficult and hard to trace storyline. She's sort of good and then she's not good. She's really more of like a host unto herself, and she's going to do whatever is interesting to her at that time. So In the comics, she does become Black Widow for a period of time to help out with a couple of missions here and there. But then she goes back and she works with AIM, or AIM, which is one of the criminal enterprises in the Marvel Universe. She turns into Super Adaptoid, which is this crazy superhero or super villain, I guess, that can take on the powers of all of the different Avengers. And so she sort of goes back and forth and lives in this sort of like transient, fluid state. But let's not forget, Avengers Campus is getting pretty crowded. I mean, we've got tons of heroes, even after the events of phases 1, 2, and 3. We've got tons of heroes still hanging around. Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, Captain Marvel, Black Panther. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And we also know that we've had a ton of characters teased. Like, let's not forget, Miles Morales was teased in Spider-Man Homecoming. Monica Rambeau, who was teased in Captain Marvel as the young Monica Rambeau. We have all of these upcoming Disney Plus series, which could tease new characters. We know that Kate Bishop is coming as in the new Hawkeye series. We know that there's a WandaVision series which could introduce characters like Wiccan and Speed. And so what we're really building towards, in my opinion, is a team called the Young Avengers. And this is not a surprise to anybody. This is a group that's been around. This is a group that many people have speculated might come around in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I think that Yelena Belova could potentially be a part of that group. Now, she wasn't traditionally a part of that group in the comics, but depending on what age they make her, she could sort of slide right into that mix. So Florence Pugh is 23 years old, but she sort of has a younger look to her. They've already used her to play younger characters in other movies, like Greta Gerwig's Little Women most recently. And so we could get a group of young Avengers. And if that's the case, and knowing about Yelena Belova's sort of fluidity, she could be a part of that group and then an enemy of that group in the future. So I think there are lots of options on the table. I do still think it's possible for her to join the actual Avengers team as well, but I don't think this is a coincidence at all that we're getting this character intro at this time. I don't think it's a coincidence that they cast an absolute superstar to play this character. I will be very interested to see what happens. We know that Marvel Cinematic Universe likes to touch on a lot of the things that the comics do, but also give us lots of new surprises. And I think that, characters like Yelena and characters that have that sort of where do they fall, are they friend or foe, I think that's going to be a bit of a recurring theme going forward, because in the first few phases of Marvel Cinematic Universe, they had a really hard time getting good villains going, and one of their most successful villains was Loki, who's sort of in this state of being, is he good? Is he bad? Is he just a host unto himself? And I think there will be more opportunities to use that in the future, and I think that Marvel will definitely jump at the chance. So, no matter what's happening, we're very excited about the new Black Widow movie. Drop us your theories in the comments. If you like this video, be sure to give us a like and a subscription, and we appreciate you watching. We'll talk to you next time.